Hey there, Grateful Gang. Lauren here. Welcome to Gratefully Living the Chronic Life. I come to you each Thursday at this time to help you, along with my special guest, to find gratitude in your life despite your struggles. And tonight we have an amazing guest. He's a repeat guest. He is one of my favorite guests. Poet James Cruz is here with us. And oddly enough, very strange coincidence, it is almost a year to the day that he was here last talking about his last book. He's got a brand new book out called The Path to Kindness that clearly I like. I mean, these are, yeah, it's like insane. I was just telling James backstage when choosing poems I wanted to make sure we talked about tonight. It was really like, ooh, this one's good. Ooh, this one's good. So you guys, if you weren't able to catch him last time, you're going to love him. And if you were able to catch it last time, you already know you're in for a treat. So thank you for being here. In case you don't know, I run a Facebook group, a community on that is for anybody looking to have more gratitude in their lives. It is called Attitude of Gratitude with Chronic Pain. Let's see. I've only been doing this broadcast for 2.5 years. You'd think I would know where these things are. All right, that's the name of my show. Here it is. Here it is. Attitude of Gratitude with Chronic Pain. You do not need to have chronic physical pain in order to join our community. We really deal with the emotional aspects of life struggles, such as chronic pain and illness. So, trauma, depression, anxiety. We welcome any and all to join our community. One of the things I love most about James's new book, The Path to Kindness, is its poems about connection and joy. The last one was about gratitude. This one's about connection. And I always say the secret sauce for a life of joy is through gratitude and connection. So that is what attitude of gratitude with chronic pain is all about. And we welcome you to join us. We have about 9,300 people, and we are a positive, no complaining group. So if you're looking for something like that, come on over. You can also find out more about me, my books. I recently started a vlog on YouTube sharing about my gratefully living my chronic life. You can find out about all of that on gratitudeaddict.com. I want to thank my guest from last week, David Freiberg from Envision Kindness. He was a wonderful guest talking about kindness, and another coincidence was that he talked about kindness, and tonight we're talking about, James's new compilation is on kindness as well. So that's a great coincidence, but he was a wonderful guest. Thank you, David, for being here. And then next week we have another repeat guest, which doesn't happen all that often, but just so happens we have the ladies from Mini Meds are going to be back with us all the way from Austria and the UK. They have 5-minute meditations that I've been posting in the group for a very long time. And they're wonderful, talking about mindfulness, meditation, gratitude. I am always each day in attitude of gratitude with chronic pain. I post something that I call a breath break. It's really just code for meditation. I don't call it meditation because a lot of people don't like that word meditation. I call it a breath break, but they're short 5, sometimes even shorter minute meditations to just help us to breathe, be in the present, and, just intentionally focus on the breath, which I find helps a lot with all aspects of my life, not only my chronic physical pain, but emotional, mental, spiritual, all of that. So they're going to be back with us next Thursday. So I hope you can join us. And finally, I mentioned that I have a new vlog. I would appreciate if you guys could subscribe to my YouTube channel. I'm trying to get to 1,000 subscribers. I'm really close at like 370. No, seriously, if I can get to 1,000, I can start having some extra perks that I would really appreciate. So join the Gratitude Addict YouTube channel would be great. So without further ado, I want to bring on James, who is here with us from his farm with his husband in Vermont. Hi, James.
Hi, Lauren. Hi, everyone.
Thank you for being back here with us, James. It's a real treat. And last time you were here, we were talking about this book.
That's right.
which I also clearly loved, How to Love the World, Poems of Gratitude and Hope. And then this brand new one, The Path to Kindness, Poems of Connection and Joy. So like
Yeah.
4 of my favorite topics in the world.
That's
Um,
right.
it's a pleasure having you here. I know I emailed you and I told you before the show, your work and you as a person too, now that we've become friends, you're just, you're like a warm hug. Your work is
Mhm.
so positive, where a lot of poetry, it's beautiful poetry, but a lot of poetry can be dark and
Mhm.
sometimes you have to be in a right mindset for it. This you can keep on a nightstand, I think,
Yeah.
and read a few things before bed. Um, so
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's sort of like what you talked about with your Facebook group, that it's, it's this kind of safe place where you can just come for positivity. Like that's what I think of my books as. It's not like we are denying the reality of life or the difficulties, but it's like if you know that this is going to be a really positive space that you can step into. I hear from people all the time, like they keep it on the bedstand or they read a poem before dinner. And one woman emailed me on Instagram even, and she said, I woke up, I was feeling really dark, really just, really panicky. And I read some poems in the middle of the night and it really helped. And that just, that makes it all worth it when you hear things like that.
it does. You're right. It is very similar, because
Hmm.
I do get from people that aren't in the group, I do get from people comments such as we're ignoring the problem and just pushing it under the rug and we're in gratitude la la land, and it's so not at all
No.
what we're about. We're a sanctuary is the way I like to think of it.
Yeah.
People know they're safe there. They know they can come and not hear stuff about the war in the Ukraine and all of that, and even not allowing posts about that was a tough decision. But
Hmm.
people are at very different different aspects of their journey, and something like that could really throw them off, and your work, I was going to say both of your books, you've got several books, and then you've got Healing the Divide, Poems of Kindness and Connection, and then you've got 2 other ones which I don't have. But talk to us about the path to kindness. How did
Hmm.
you it's through your same publisher, Story Publishing, who
Yeah.
also publishes my favorite gratitude book of all time, Wake Up Grateful by Christy Nelson. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, tell us how you went from that compilation to this one.
Well, I've been thinking about this and I would welcome any thoughts you have. I guess it just feels like gratitude and kindness are just so related that I think gratitude for me is about paying more attention to our lives, what's around us, and embracing that as much as we can, even the difficult, because the difficult is here to teach us. And so, to the extent that we can just embrace what we have around us, we start to recognize, kind of like we're talking about, we recognize what's really positive and what's going well and what we enjoy.
Right. I agree.
Yeah,
And um, one of the many things I love about your work is you take those moments that many of us don't recognize because I shouldn't speak for everybody else. For me, that I'm often not mindful enough to notice that dewdrop on that leaf over there, that
mhm.
that you write an entire poem about. Not really, but pretty much. I mean, things like
Pretty
that
much.
things like that are things that, you'll write a piece about it, or we'll collect a poem about it and put it in one of your collections, and I'll be like, "Oh my gosh, you're right." There was one, was it berry pie? Am I remembering one, like, something about berry pie, berries, smell of a berry pie out of the oven? I don't know, it was a while ago
Hmm.
on your Facebook page. I don't know, but that's just an
Yeah.
example. You are able to take these everyday things that we're also in a I am often in a rush, and don't take the time to recognize, and you'll put it into words and all of a sudden bring it an entirely new perspective to it.
Yeah. Well, I think that's what the best poems do. They bring fresh eyes to the world. They allow us to see our own lives in a brand new way. But we don't have to go to, New Zealand or somewhere really exotic to experience the world. It's all about seeing that dewdrop or smelling the berry pie that just came out of the oven. And I think that's where gratitude really lives, is in these small connections with daily life. And I think that's where kindness lives too, in these small connections with other people, and we're calling them small, but they end up being really large. I think, these small moments are the ones that we carry with us throughout our lives. And so I really, my anthologies and all my books really are meant for me first. It's what I need. And so during the pandemic, especially when I was gathering these poems, I needed to remember that kindness still exists, that the possibility for connection still exists. And I was kind of starting to gather these poems as we were beginning to open up and coming out of the pandemic a little bit. And I felt like, I was hearing all these stories about, people being really nasty on planes and really misbehaving. And I felt like, I myself and we all really need reminders of why we're here and that kindness is still possible, and that, as my husband and I often say, kindness really can save lives.
Oop, he's a bit frozen. He'll be back. His internet connection, he warned me that it... Oh, he's back. You just froze for a minute there.
So I was just saying, just that we never know how what we do, even though it might seem small, is going to affect other people. That smile or that wave just might make such a difference.
That's a really good segue into the introduction from your book, if you don't mind. He's got a beautiful introduction that he wrote to the book with a story about his husband. It's called The Practice of Connection. Well, before we do that, let's say hi to everybody. Sandy Montgomery, I know you know Sandy. She's the one that runs our creative writing club, and I know you two have spoken before. She's our resident poet in the group. Hey, Sandy, thanks for being here. Linda, hi, Linda. Thanks for being here. Another Linda, hello. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Oh, I should also say I'm giving away 2 books tonight. Oh, she's got the hashtag. Mary knows it. So if you'd like to win, we've got 2 books tonight. I've got an extra copy of the last book, How to Love the World, Poems of Gratitude and Hope, and the brand new one, The Path to Kindness. So anytime during the broadcast tonight, you have to be signed in if you're watching from inside the group. So if you're coming up as Facebook user, it won't register you. So make sure you're signed in through StreamYard, but just put hashtag gratitude in a comment anytime throughout the next 45 minutes or so, and you can be entered to win. All right. So thank you everybody for being here. So the practice of connection. You've got a beautiful story.
Yeah. So maybe I'll just read the first couple paragraphs here.
Sure.
When my husband Brad was 19 years old, he joined the military, hoping to follow in the footsteps of his uncle and grandfather. During his first few weeks at the assigned Air Force base, however, he fell into a deep depression. After a few sessions with the on-base psychologist, he finally realized he was gay and came out. You know what this means, the psychologist said. It meant that under the don't ask, don't tell policy, he was soon discharged from the military and sent home. I can only imagine the shame that followed him to the small town in Vermont where he grew up, and where he told no one for years the real reason he left the Air Force. Brad first shared his story with me not long after we moved in together. Suicide was a daily option, he said. The idea that this gentle farmer, who uplifts everyone he meets and cares so much for the land, might have ended his life still seems inconceivable to me. Yet what kept him pushing through those dark days, he says, were the small kindnesses offered by neighbors, friends, and customers at the organic farm where he began to work. He would be out for a run or walk, certain that this would be the day he could bear his secret no longer, and someone passing by in their pickup truck would wave, or a friend of the family would stop to ask how he was doing. The weight of his shame became lighter. and he knew he could keep going for another day. I can hardly get through it without crying.
Perfect example of how those small things, a smile, a kind word, can totally change a life.
Mm-hmm.
And keep a life, if
Mm-hmm.
suicide was an option. That is just so beautiful and a great way to, marry in the connection and kindness
Yeah.
together. I think so many of us lost like what our definition of connection was during COVID. We had to sort of pivot and rework that. Um, an attitude of gratitude with chronic pain. We've been using Zoom for many years because we're all over the world, and many of us, are bedbound or housebound or whatever, and can't leave the house. So Zoom has been a beautiful connection tool for us. Is it as great as a warm hug in person? No, but it's something.
Yeah.
But the world got to know Zoom over the past 2 years, and I am grateful for that as a way of connection, because we didn't really have a choice, did we? But
Mm-hmm.
and last week I was talking to my guest. There was a Time magazine article you may have seen just like 2 weeks ago about the effects of loneliness and how it's this massive health emergency. Loneliness, 1/3 of people are reporting being lonely, and it's so it's just so sad. And little nuggets like this of people being kind to one another and
Mm-hmm.
and fostering connection like that is so important.
Yeah, and again, I mean, I think it's why I was really driven to put out this book and choose all these poems, because I mean, I really felt that loneliness too. I'm blessed and grateful to have a husband and to have his family nearby, but my family was, 1,000 miles away, and we were all on screens, and so I really started feeling that loneliness, and I needed the reminders of, what feels good, and that sense of warmth between us. And one of the things I did besides collecting these poems was I kept a kindness journal throughout the pandemic, and I still kind of keep up the practice, but it's just the idea of like capturing these really small moments, because they're almost always small, you know um, and reminding like, ooh, that felt really good to just talk to the cashier at the grocery store, or ooh, it felt really good to reach out to that friend, even though I was kind of shy and kind of anxious about doing that. So it just like, it kind of built up this muscle. And I think the poems in this book really helped me to do that. They really led me into that, because when you read these poems, there's just this sense of warmth that comes through, whether it's with the natural world or with other people. And you just realize like, oh, I want to go for a walk, or, oh, I want to talk to somebody right now. And
Right.
it's like we kind of lose that sense of what we need in ourselves. I think that's what leads to some of the loneliness that people are feeling.
And I think we're also programmed nowadays to be, so busy,
Yeah.
and we think we don't need others, but we do need
Mhm.
others. We need, in fact, there's a um, beautiful quote by, is it your partner, Danusha? Is that her name? Your
Mhm.
partner? And yeah. Um, what we really want to know is, am I welcome here? Am I part of the tribe? Do I have a place? That was from the forward. And it's so true. We all want to feel heard and like we belong and a part of something. We
Mhm.
may think we're okay alone, but we yearn to feel that connection, don't we?
We do. We are connective, as human beings. We're wired for connection,
Right.
and so we have to listen to that. And some of us may need more connection than others. I'm someone who really enjoys a lot of solitude because of the writing practice, and I
Sure.
really love meditation, mindfulness, breath breaks, as you put it. Um, but I still need, it surprises me sometimes, because I'll be spending a day alone, and it's like, I actually really need to talk to somebody. I
Right.
really need that little bit of connection.
Yeah, it's important. And for those that are out there that watch, that live with chronic pain and illness, isolation is a really big thing. And I'm recovering alcoholic as well, and that illness as well is a disease of isolation.
Yeah.
I was surrounded by friends and family that wanted to help, and I isolated myself, which I guess is incredibly common.
Yeah.
Um, so I knew once I got out of, my rehab that I needed to seek out connecting with others. Part of why I founded the group was to connect with each other. And I know that, I love my work. I love the work I do. I love my writing and the broadcasts and all that. And but I can get caught up in, and I haven't really talked to anybody other than my husband in a couple days. I should really, pop into our live chats or something. I can definitely get caught up in that as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, there's a great quote from you in the intro that says, "Poetry is an ideal tool in times of uncertainty and change in our lives because it grounds us in the now, opening our hearts and minds to the worlds outside and within."
Hmm. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah,
Sure.
I really think that, and I think not all poems are going to really speak to your heart. And so I think it helps to realize that even in an anthology like this, where I've tried to make it accessible and find pieces that people are going to enjoy, not every poem will speak to you, at least where you are at that moment.
True.
But it's important for me to point out, like, these are not poems that you might read in the New Yorker. These are not more intellectual or academic poems. These are much more heartfelt, just by real people leading real lives. And I think poetry just can, like, calm our nervous system. It really slows us down, because we kind of get in those busy modes that you're talking about, Lauren, and we just, like, scan through articles, we scan through texts or emails. I do
Right.
it, I do it all the time, and, like, just trying to get the information. But poetry, to get the information, you have to read it more slowly. And it's more than just information. It's heart information, it's soul information and soul food. And so I think that's why it's so ideal, because it allows us that sense of warmth, that sense of connection, even without reaching out to another person. I think in a poem, I'm reaching out to someone and saying, share in this moment, share in this intimacy with me. And
Mm.
so it becomes a gesture of kindness and connection.
It is. You're right. And for me, one of the things I love about, you know, your poetry in particular is they're very palatable. They're not all that long, and I usually like to read a poem at least twice to
Mhm.
make sure I'm absorbing everything. And each time I go back, I get something different. But it's a very mindful medium, isn't it,
Yeah, it
to
really is.
read poetry? And I know many that live with chronic conditions. Reading a book from start to finish is not really doable, but this you can pick up, you can turn to a page and find something that might speak to you, right?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I love that aspect of anthologies, and especially books like this. You can turn to something, read it. Oftentimes the poems are pretty short. You can read it in a few minutes. Even if you want to read it twice, it won't take too long. And probably it will shift something. I can't promise it's going to make you feel instantly better or cure anything necessarily, but it always shifts my mood. It's like, I've taken some time, I've slowed down, and so it changes things.
It does. And with both, with all three of your books that I have, you'll either feel grateful, moved, or you'll get a chuckle. I
Yeah.
experience a lot of emotions from your poems.
Mm.
You were speaking of busyness, and I feel like I put something down. Like there was a really good poem about busyness.
Mm.
Oh, I probably put a sticky in it and didn't write down the thing. That's okay.
Yeah.
We'll come to it eventually, maybe. There was something about slowing down, but I don't remember. But you had a couple that you had mentioned to me that would be good to read tonight. Do you want
Mhm.
to choose
Yeah.
something?
Yeah. Maybe I'll just start with this poem that I really enjoy reading. This is by Julia Fehrenbacher, wonderful poet. She's pretty active on Facebook. You can add her, find her work on there. But this is called The Most Important Thing. And I love this because this is, in this book, there's a lot about connecting with other people, but there's also a lot about connecting with ourselves. And so self-care, self-compassion, and all that. So this is one of those poems. The Most Important Thing. I am making a home inside myself, a shelter of kindness where everything is forgiven, everything allowed, a quiet patch of sunlight to stretch out without hurry, where all that has been banished and buried is welcomed, spoken, listened to, released. A fiercely friendly place I can claim as my very own. I am throwing arms open to the whole of myself, especially the fearful, fault-finding, falling apart, unfinished parts, knowing every seed and weed, every drop of rain has made the soil richer. I will light a candle, pour a cup of hot tea, gather around the warmth of my own blazing fire. I will howl if I want to, knowing this flame can burn through any perceived problem, any prescribed perfectionism, any lying limitation, every heavy thing. I am making a home inside myself where grace blooms in grand and glorious abundance, a shelter of kindness that grows all the truest things. I whisper hallelujah to the friendly sky. Watch now as I burst into blossom.
Wow.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Yeah.
The Path to Kindness, Poems of Connection and Joy is what we're reading from. James' new book just came out in April, right? It literally just came out.
That's right.
And all of you've got some of your own poetry in here, and then you've chosen, and one of a guest that you introduced me to, Michelle Weigers, is in here.
Yeah.
Again, she was on the show not for poetry but for she does mind body connection work, and she was a wonderful guest. So she also writes poetry as well, so she's in here as well. And there's some names you guys will recognize, like Ross Gay. I know many of us took the gratefulness.org course that was just offered, and Ross was a guest on there. And then I don't want to skip over this because I'll get into read the poetry and I'll forget it. You've got a couple workshops coming up, which I've shared in the group and I will share in the show notes, but you've got one on self-compassion.
Yeah. So next Friday, July 1st, 12 p.m. to 2 p.m. Eastern time. I got to get my time zone straight. It's going to be just a smaller group workshop, writing for self-compassion. And it's really just about, we read a couple poems, talk about it, and then write together and then share our work if we feel comfortable doing that. So it's a really just gentle, nurturing space if you want to come and write. And the seats are limited, so I'm not sure how many folks have already signed up. And then there is a larger poetry kind of writing webinar for poets, but also just people who enjoy poetry. That's called The Sacred Everyday, and you can find that at thepoetryofresilience.com. And or just message me on Facebook or something like that. But yeah, so, and then the webinar, of course, is less interactive. It's a larger group of folks, but we also have a Facebook group attached to that for anyone who's interested in sharing writing or asking questions and things like that. And we keep the chat open so people can always ask questions. And we have lots of guests. Natalie Goldberg, who some people may know, Writing Down the Bones. She's going to be on there.
I have that book.
Yeah. Yeah, she's a great one. And so and that one really is it's about gratitude as well. It's just about finding the sacred and holy in the everyday lives that we're living.
Sounds beautiful. Can they access these things through your website, jamescruz.net also?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and then they can sign up for the email list too. That's the best way to find out about things. And I send out a weekly poem and a writing prompt every week. People seem to really enjoy that. Some of my own, some by other people. And I always welcome people to try their hand at writing and share it with me if they want to.
Yeah, it's great. I know last time you were on, last June 24th, as a matter of fact, I remember after the show, I was talking to you about thinking about possibly doing a sister spinoff group on creative writing, which we now, Sandy Montgomery has taken that. She started in November. We've got a nice, very enthusiastic, energetic group. Some poetry, some not, but it's really interesting to and fantastic to see people healing in different ways. And some people do it through arts and crafts, some people do it through writing, and it's really just beautiful seeing people opening up their hearts to that medium.
Yeah, writing is just one way of doing that, but I think we sometimes forget that it is a way. We all have access to the everyday material of language, and I think with poetry, people tend to think like, oh, it has to be some like, higher intellectual pursuit. But, most of us probably started out as poets. We read poetry, we wrote poetry when we were kids and delighted in it. And I'm, like Ross, I'm all about delight. And so I try to invite people back into that delight of poetry.
Speaking of which, and I know you mentioned that these aren't going to be poems that you find in the New Yorker, but for me at least, I'm not an intellectual type, but I relate to these. They're accessible. They make me feel warm and fuzzy, and I like to feel warm and fuzzy.
Yeah,
I live in a body that's not very comfortable a lot of the
right.
time, and your work and you as a person too, and being your friend, you are comfortable. Your work is comfortable. And that's why when I first found this book, over a year ago and, read it, I'm like, I have to stalk James Cruz. I hope to get him on my chest if he's
Well, I'm
available.
glad you did.
Me too. But I don't think you have to have this intellectual, like this format and all of that. This is just, it's from the heart. It's from right here.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. And I appreciate what you say about, wanting to feel warm and fuzzy. Like I think we want to feel these emotions, the warmth, the connection, the kindness. And sometimes our culture can be really cynical and think like, oh, the warm and fuzzy, like,
Yeah.
just kind of reject that. And I like to say that I'm a recovering cynic myself. And so it's like, that's partly what I'm in recovery for. And just really embracing that warmth and fuzziness. And, I think I do that in part because I know what it's like to live with a lot of discomfort. I've lived with a lot of anxiety for a long time, and I'm always seeking that calmness, that slowing down, because I know I have a slow and calm demeanor, but like in the mind, it's crazy. It's
Right.
crazy up there. So anything that kind of calms me down is really helpful.
It is. And I think people often look at people that practice positive psychology things and gratitude and all of that as um, like it's woo woo and it's, they're just in denial and all of that stuff. And I would argue, I think it takes more work to do it this way, but the payoff
Yeah.
is huge.
Yeah, I would agree with you. Yeah, I've definitely had just not much actually, but some criticism for kind of going in this direction because I'm sort of a recovering academic as well. Like I went to grad school for poetry and all of that, and but I've decided to take this direction and really kind of embrace more genuine, heartfelt work.
Well, I am glad that you have. Let's get to some comments here. If you guys are tuning in late, we're here with James Cruz, who has a beautiful new book out called The Path to Kindness, Poems of Connection and Joy. We're giving away a copy of this and a copy of his previous book, How to Love the World, Poems of Gratitude and Hope. All you have to do is write hashtag gratitude in the comments, hashtag gratitude. And I see a whole bunch of you are doing that. So I'm happy to see that. Let me get back at Annalie Tadala Vetter says connection is vital. I couldn't agree more. I don't know if I got to this one before. Mary, so glad you're back, James. Oh, yes, I did because she did the hashtag gratitude in there too. She got a twofer in there. Sarah, welcome back, James. Excited for your new release. Me too.
Sarah.
Um, Suzanne says, beautiful poetry. Thank you. Oh, and Mary, kindness journal. I love that idea. Funny you say that, Mary, because when you were talking about that, James, Mary's the one that suggested, I'm pretty sure it was you, Mary, that suggested that anytime somebody write like a nice compliment about what the group has done for them or something like that, I keep a journal. So I have one right here. This is my, it's got a hippo on it. This is my journal that I write down kind comments I hear, which is sort of like a kindness journal. And so if I'm having a rough day, I can go back and be like, okay, you know, puts things into perspective a bit.
That's a great idea.
You were talking about self-compassion, which leads me to a poem of yours in the new book called Self-Compassion. Would you mind reading that first? It's on page
Yeah,
66.
absolutely. Yeah. So this one, it starts out. My friend and I are making fun of meditation a little bit. This was while I was still a bit of a cynic, as you can imagine. But then I realized later on, of course, that just how essential this is, and just part of my own self-compassion. Self-compassion. My friend and I snickered the first time we heard the meditation teacher, a grown man, call himself honey with a hand placed over his heart to illustrate how we too might become more gentle with ourselves and our runaway minds. It's been years since we sat with legs twisted on cushions, holding back our laughter. But today I found myself crouched on the floor again, not meditating exactly, just agreeing to be still, saying honey to myself each time I thought about my husband splayed on the couch with aching joints and fever from a tick bite. What if he never gets better? Or considered the threat of more wildfires, the possible collapse of the Gulf Stream, then remembered that in a few more minutes I'd have to climb down to the cellar and empty the bucket placed beneath a leaky pipe that can't be fixed until next week. How long does any of us really have before the body begins to break down and empty its mysteries into the air? Oh, honey, I said, for once, without a trace of irony or blush of shame, the touch of my own hand on my chest, like that of a stranger, oddly comforting in spite of the facts.
Beautiful.
And I've been doing this practice. I started. This was written during the pandemic, and so I mentioned my husband having this tick bite. Well, we also thought it might be COVID, and it just seemed like one of those weeks when everything was going wrong. The news was terrible, and just all this stuff, and so I started while I was meditating, just placing a hand on my heart, and or even like both hands sometimes, and just like feeling that, and just sending warmth to myself, not doing anything special. And it really became transformative as a practice. I know that a lot of other people kind of do like loving kindness meditation, things like that, but that was really life-changing for me, and I continue to do it to this day. Sometimes if I'm really stressed, like just lying back with both hands on my heart, just eyes closed, and just sending that warmth to myself, it really amazes me.
I agree. I wrote a good night post mentioning that a couple weeks ago, but you would, it's so simple and you would think it doesn't, I mean, it's me, I'm touching, who cares? It
Right.
is, you're right, the warmth and connection you feel with yourself, it really is transformative.
Hmm.
That, and then we do a gratitude circle on Zoom on Fridays, and we give ourselves a
Mm.
hug, like, and say it's from all of us to all of you, but it's amazing what just a simple gesture, like a hand over the heart or the hug can do. It really, it's almost like, oh gosh, where have you been?
Yeah,
You know,
right.
haven't
Yeah,
connected with myself. It's really, really interesting. That's a beautiful poem. Thank you for sharing with us.
thank you for asking for it.
How did you have the idea for the connection? I know this was written during the pandemic, but
Mhm.
had you had a connection thing in mind prior to the pandemic, or was this a product of the pandemic, would you say?
Well, the first anthology I did, Healing the Divide, that you have there too, that was about kindness and connection, and I just realized that I'm just really drawn to the practice of kindness and connection, just as a way of being in the world, and so I loved putting together the book on gratitude and hope, but I wanted to revisit this. Just to see if there were more poems out there that I could share and find, and there were just so many, and so I really love thinking about, talking about kindness, and I think that's what drove me to this. So I had inklings of it before the pandemic, but I think, like so much, COVID just just amped it up and made me realize how much there was still a need for talking about this, and especially with younger people. I put together and write my books with younger people in mind because I've worked with younger people for years, and mostly college age and a little bit younger. But I put these books together with them in mind, hoping that they can encounter these poems. I include some reflective pauses in each book so that people who want to journal can use these. There are questions for use in the classroom so that if you're a teacher, or if you're leading a reading group, people can use those questions too. So I really want all of us to be thinking about this, and thinking about it as a piece of whatever practice we're really drawn to. Like, we might be more drawn to gratitude and gratefulness. So, thinking about how kindness fits into that. Maybe it's more, Buddhism and mindfulness. How does kindness fit into that? But it just seems like this really essential piece of who we are as humans that we can so easily forget. And if you just watch the news all the time, you think the world is not a kind place. It's
No.
this terribly unwelcoming place, and so I think I need those reminders every single day that, like, okay, yes, like Danusha Lameris was saying, like, we're seeking that belonging. Am I welcome here? Am I,
Yeah.
is humanity still my tribe? Just we need those reinforcements that yes, it is.
Right, because I think our inside voices are often telling us, "No, you don't belong," and, "No, you're not
Yeah.
worthy of being here," and, you know, getting that reinforcement and knowing that you do belong and that there is kindness in the world. You're right, I've actually just r within the past month or so, I've taken a news fast because
Yeah.
the last school shooting happened, and I've been wanting to do it for a long time, and I had to tune out. So now I
Mhm.
watch, gardening YouTube shows in the morning
Yeah.
because that brings me happiness. It was doing nothing for me, especially starting the day.
Yeah.
And I know there's kindness out there. I see it in 9,300 people in AOG
Mhm.
every single day. These people who have a lot to complain about join a group where there's no complaining and wanna
Mhm.
live a better life. That's amazing.
That is amazing.
Or
Yeah.
people like you who write these gifts for us to enjoy and be able to, send it. It's like a straight shot to our heart and soul
Mhm.
in a good way. It's a beautiful
Yeah.
thing.
Well, thank you for recognizing that, and for being a leader in the way that you are with your groups and the journals that you're putting out into the world. It's such a beautiful thing that you're doing too.
Thank you.
And it every little bit helps. All we can do, I think, is take care of our little corner of the universe
Yes.
here, and that brings us back to those small things that we can do for each other, and that end up not being so small. That
Right.
really, they signal to other people that we care about them, that they're not forgotten, that they're seen and heard. And then when we care for ourselves in those small ways, we're sending that same signal that, you matter, I see you. I think that's why the hand on the heart, I call it the oh honey practice. It's like, oh honey, you're still important. I feel you, I hear you. But I still feel a little cheesy when I do it sometimes. I've had to be okay with that. Like, you can't be cheesy. You're not going to be free. Yeah, that's how I see it.
That is true. That's a good point. And I think I could be getting this wrong, but I think it's John Kabat-Zinn. And I think others do it too, but I think he encourages people to put a half smile on their face if you're feeling down, and just the act of doing even a half smile will help to release serotonin, which is the feel good hormones, and it can feel really silly.
Yeah.
I actually had a laughter therapist on the show last year, and she recommended putting a chopstick in between your teeth to help you, and it really works. But yeah, these little things we can do for ourselves, little things, not only for ourselves, but doing our part, like you said. You just never know when something you say or do, and using your words, in the best way you can, and not hiding behind the keyboard and spewing venom, it can really mean a lot.
Yeah.
Or holding space for somebody and listening,
Yeah.
without judgment, and offering a solution.
Yeah, and as you know, probably, the science really backs this up. I think I was listening to a podcast that was saying, they ran this experiment where they had people early in the morning, like early in the day, I think it was like a work setting, they would email 3 different people with compliments for specific things that they had done, like just thanking them for what they had done, like, you did a really good job. And the people who were giving the thanks, who were giving the compliments, felt so much better. So it's like, that's giving that light can become a practice, but we just need to be reminded, like, oh, I have that light to give. I have that power within me to connect and brighten someone else's day.
Such a great point. And it does feel good. And when you can see the other person light up because of something, accepting them is something that I have to work on. It's difficult for me to accept them, but giving them feels fantastic.
Yeah, it goes both ways, though, I think.
Kirsten says, thank you both for all you do for me personally, for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kirsten. Let's read another poem.
Yeah.
My goodness, there's so many that. Oh, there's another one by you that this one made me smile. The Pool, page 78.
Yeah. Well, this is a good one. Father's Day was just happened, right? So
yes.
We're in the midst of summer. And this is a poem kind of about one of those moments where, maybe when you were younger, your parents had flaws just like everyone else, but you didn't realize some of the things that they did for you, some of the sacrifices that they made. And I've had lots of these moments since losing my father about 20 years ago, where I looked back and realized, like, no, he was not a perfect person. And he did a lot. There were lots of these moments where there was something special happening that, as a kid, I just didn't recognize. So this is called The Pool. Because he couldn't afford the kidney-shaped in-ground pool we all wanted, my father went out and bought a used galvanized pool whose rusted rim I refused to touch. As usual, he had a solution. He split a length of black rubber hose down the middle with his pocket knife, then stretched it over the rough sides, inch by inch, until no rust showed. Back then, I never thought such gestures were selfless, evidence of what we call unconditional love. But now I feel my small hands gripping soft rubber, and I see my father on the back porch, cigarette hanging from his smiling lips, as he watches me lift myself out of the pool, flinging cold water from my goose-pimpled skin, as if I'd been reborn again.
That is so sweet. That is absolutely precious. Now you have, was it your first book was dedicated to your father? Or was it there's a
I think
poem for your father, I guess.
second book. Yeah, second
Second
book.
book, okay,
Mhm.
yes. Um, gosh, James, he would be so proud. He would be
Oh,
so proud.
thank you.
You're welcome. Um, here's one. I'll read one.
Yeah, please.
This is actually on the page next to it. I mean, as you can tell, you guys, from all the colored stickies, I don't know if you can see how many there are here. They're just, we're not going to be able to get to them all. But this one just made me smile and I could relate a bit. This is by Joyce Sutphin called Carrying Water to the Field. And on those hot afternoons in July, when my father was out on the tractor cultivating rows of corn, my mother would send us out with a mason jar filled with ice and water, a dish towel wrapped around it for insulation. Like a rocket launched to an orbiting planet, we would cut across the fields in a trajectory calculated to intercept or perhaps even surprise him in his absorption with the row and the turning always over earth beneath the blade. He would look up and see us, throttle down, stop, and step from the tractor with the grace of a cowboy dismounting his horse, and receive gratefully the jar of water, ice cubes now melted into tiny shards, drinking it down in a single gulp, while we watched mission accomplished.
Mm,
It's so sweet.
yeah. Yeah, so that was something that the kids were doing for the dad, and just bringing joy all around. Yeah, I love that poem so much.
My husband is out, he goes out on the tractor to mow the lawn every weekend. And I wish I could say I'm a good wife and I bring him a drink. I don't. But often I have to like tell him something and he's got his headphones on, he's going back and forth and he's very vigilant with it. So I can, when they were talking about intercepting him and moving this way and that way, I'm like, if I go this way and I don't want to startle him, so I could relate to that. It's adorable.
Love it. Yeah.
Let me see. Let's see. Make sure you guys get hashtag gratitude in. This was based on Sandy says this was not based on the one I just read. This was based on yours, James. She said, I love that one.
Oh, thanks,
And
Sandy.
beautiful poem, Heather. Thank you. Thank you. We have a couple
Thanks,
minutes for
Heather.
you guys to get hashtag gratitude in, and hopefully it'll be working. We'll do a drawing. Um, what are you have a favorite or two that you'd like to finish up with? I mean, I wish we could read all of them,
Sure.
but I'm
Yeah.
sure it must be asking you like, you know,
To pick my favorite
yeah,
children or
exactly.
something.
Right.
Yeah. Well, there is one that comes to mind that people really enjoy. This is by Rudy Francisco, and he writes a lot for young adults. He's more of like a slam poet, and he's been on like Jimmy Kimmel, and he's taken his poetry far and wide. But I really love this poem. So simple, such a few amount of words, but so much emotion packed in there. And this is called Mercy. She asks me to kill the spider. Instead, I get the most peaceful weapons I can find. I take a cup and a napkin. I catch the spider, put it outside, and allow it to walk away. If I am ever caught in the wrong place at the wrong time, just being alive and not bothering anyone, I hope I am greeted with the same kind of mercy.
That is excellent. That is excellent.
Yeah,
I do remember reading that now that you say that. That's
yeah,
adorable. And you're right, so few words, but it says so much. It's beautiful.
yeah, yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, just calling our attention to the creatures around us. And I'm not advocating that everyone, we tend to let the spiders live because they eat the bugs that we don't want
Right.
around. But
Yeah, James lives on a farm.
yeah,
So yeah, spiders are good for you.
that's right.
You mentioned before about your reflective pauses, and I just wanted to talk about those a little bit. So every, I don't know how many pages, 20 pages or so, maybe, that
Yeah.
you have something called a reflective pause where you'll talk about some of the poems that are in here, and then invitation for writing and reflection. So it's broken up that way, and then you do like a little spotlight on some moments of the poems, and then in the back, as you had said, you've got reading group questions and topics for discussion based on many of these, and little bios on every poet. How do you I know a lot of them are your friends. When you are putting together, your publisher asks you to put out a book, do you how does that work exactly? What does that look like? Do you put the word out to your poet friends and say, this is the kind of the topics we're looking at, send me what you've got? How does that work?
Well, it usually works for most people or most editors that way. They're kind of seeking work from other people, but it's very different for me because I'm always looking for that sense of warmth, and like just it's hard to explain exactly what I'm looking for. So I don't usually ask people for work. I kind of seek it out on my own. So, I have a lot of friends who are poets, like you mentioned. And so I keep an eye out on social media, and, people often share poems. People are turning to like Instagram, Facebook for poetry so much more now. And so there's a lot out there. And so I kind of take it upon myself to sift through that and kind of pick out the ones that I think a larger, more mainstream audience and younger people too will appreciate. And so that's how I choose the poems. A few people who I know kind of write in the vein that I'm looking at, I'll send them a note like, hey, this is the new anthology, can you send me some poems? But mostly I'm just gathering poems along the way, and poetry is sort of like my daily practice. It is how I connect with myself. It feeds my writing practice. And so I just love gathering poems. And I usually encourage people to read a poem and not worry so much about what it means, but like just pay attention to what happens in you. So what does it bring up for you? What does it spark for you? And kind of turn it back on ourselves, because I think we were trained a little too much in probably high school and college to kind of pick apart a poem. What's it trying to say? What does it mean?
Right.
And I think like it's more important to say, well, what am I saying to this poem? Like what is it bringing up for me? So to just kind of make that little switch. And so I kind of see each poem as like a daily prompt, almost like that I can carry with me or write about or journal about. Like I have this poem that I'm going to post about this young woman, this person writing about how as a young woman, she went on this field trip to the rocky Maine coast, and all these tide pools were everywhere. And she just got lost in these little worlds. She didn't think about, her classmates or her teacher. And I love that idea of just getting so lost in something that, the rest of the world falls away. So that's just one example. And so I've just.
Uh-oh, frozen. He'll be back. Isn't he just amazing, you guys? He's just amazing. So we're almost at the hour. Come on back. He's back. He's back. You actually just led into what was going to be my final question, is for people that may want to dabble in poetry or feel very intimidated by it, what would be your best piece of advice for them in getting started? Like, I think people feel like they need to, write the next masterpiece. It's got to follow a certain format. What would be your advice to them?
I think just a few things, really. We learned a lot about the rules of poetry or what poetry has to be. And to the extent that you can, I would say just throw all that out the window. Because when I sit down and write a poem, I can't think about, is it going to be a masterpiece? Is it going to be published? Will anyone like it? It's really, do I like it? Do I respond to it? And I don't believe that there are any rules for poetry. It really can be anything. It's just whatever sings to you and whatever sings to your ear. So throwing all the rules out the window. And, if you want to write some poems, read some poems, and find poems that you really like. And if someone writes a poem you really like, kind of ask yourself, well, again, what does that bring up in me? And maybe I'd like to try to write a poem like that in my own way. Like I shared my self-compassion poem, so maybe people would want to write about a moment of self-compassion when you did your version of putting the hand on the heart and said, "Oh, honey," what would that look like for you? So just kind of, again, turning around the poem or whatever you read and thinking like, well, how can I write about that? What do I have to say?
Great advice. Great
Yeah.
advice. So we're at the end of the hour, unfortunately, but we have a couple books to give away. So we've been talking tonight about the newest book, The Path to Kindness, Poems of Connection and Joy. So let's see if this thing's going to work for us tonight. I hate to say, but things have been going oddly well, which tells me that it won't, but let's see what happens. I shouldn't be, I got to get rid of that. We didn't get to the tomato poem. That's okay. I'll post the tomato poem. There's a tomato poem that James wrote that I remembered he wrote it. I stalked it. I wanted to read tonight. Those of you in the group know I'm a bit obsessed with my tomatoes. Okay, share screen. Thank you, everybody, for being here. All right, we don't want to share that. Here we go. Okay, let's see. We have it. Oh, we do. Okay. Good luck, everybody. The first book we're giving away is the new one, The Path of Kindness, Poems of Connection and Joy. And the winner is Linda. Linda's been pretty lucky lately, I think. Congratulations, Linda. I'll get that to you. And let's do the second one. I have an extra copy of How to Love the World, Poems of Gratitude. Oh, no, what happened to it? Oh, no. Oh, there's the thing that went wrong. It just disappeared on me. That's weird.
Well, if things were too perfect, it would just be really boring,
Well, I didn't kick myself out of the broadcast this time, so that's good. James holds the esteemed honor of being the first guest I had that I kicked myself out of the broadcast. Something's preventing me from giving away this book. I will figure out another way. I can do I'll look through the hashtag gratitudes and I'll give it away tomorrow. So James Cruz, thank you again for being here. You are just a breath of fresh air and a wonderful poet and person. I'm very grateful to be your friend and that you came back to talk to us tonight.
Well, thanks for having me, my friend. It's so good to spend time with you. It's my delight.
You too. You guys, if you want to sign up for any of his workshops, find out, more about him, his books, it's jamescruz.net. And I highly recommend his work right on your bedstand. And I will see you guys next week. Peace and love. Get your gratitude on.